Welcome once again to another episode of The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, and I also host a radio show, The Catholic Connection, here on EWTN Radio every day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. It is great to be here with my co-hosts, of course, Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. And ladies, this is a topic, family feuds and the feminine perspective, that everyone, I think, can relate to. Everyone has something or someone in their family or circle of friends. But, you know, as the old saying goes, as we have in our notes here, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. So what do we do about that from a not only a feminine perspective, but a Catholic perspective when there's friction in the family? And then later on in the program, we're going to talk about when faith causes that friction in the family.
That's right. Well, I'd like to start, Teresa, by reading a scripture quote from Proverbs, which comes Proverbs 17:1. Better a dry crust with peace than a house full of feasting with strife. The start of strife is like the opening of a dam. Therefore, check a quarrel before it begins.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know what I think of? You know, when you think about people look forward to the holidays, and we talk about the holidays as Christmas and Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving and then Christmas. And when you think about the holidays, how many people begin to get a knot in their stomach? Because then the friction comes up about who's not going to be happy and whose house we're going to and what we're going to eat and who's doing what. Do you ever notice that?
Who's buying what gift for whom?
Yeah, with the Christmas, it's the gift stuff. And the measuring stick comes out, like who's doing what. And it does create a lot of what's supposed to be joyful times, like Thanksgiving, you're sharing a meal together. You know, it always says like, oh, don't talk politics, don't talk religion, because that'll create, and so-and-so is coming, and you can't talk about that, and watch out this one.
And so-and-so did this to that person 20 years ago, so don't pick up that incident again.
That's right, because they're still holding a grudge. I mean, there are some families, I mean, and I know this a lot from, you know, relatives of mine, relatives of my husband, some people holding grudges, like you're saying, for decades. And then how does that go in line with when we walk into Mass, into church, and you're still holding a grudge? You know, I mean, the scripture is saying that you're supposed to settle an argument with your brother before you come to the altar, you know?
Yeah. And I think also for some people, the holidays and this whole idea of family, when families are supposed to be together, whether it's a 4th of July picnic, whether it's, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas, as you mentioned, it's painful because those family frictions, those problems have caused separation, and so they're alone.
Right.
But it's like you feel like you're between a rock and a hard place, speaking from personal experience, as I know we both can.
Right.
You don't want to be with that person because you know that it's going to be very uncomfortable, but at the same time, the family is broken, and so there's still a sadness there.
There is. There's definitely
There are
sadness.
instances when one person doesn't want another person to be invited, and therefore there's some competition. Let's do it at my house this year because then I get to call the shots versus let's not go over to the other house. And so that starts building up days and sometimes even a month before. And then you throw in the difference between how men and women will react to conflict and to conflict resolution. And for us ladies, we tend to remember things that happened 25 years ago. We can maybe even remember what we were wearing that day because we are very detailed. For the gentlemen, it might be different. They may want to just tough it out and go out in the parking lot or just an explosion of testosterone. But you know, and then the next week, it's gone. So we have to be understanding when we have female and male relationships going on in the family that people are going to react to them differently, and that doesn't mean that they don't think that is important enough. It's just that as men and women, we will react differently.
Right. Also, too, I think people should be encouraged that if you're experiencing any type of strife or have ever, you're not alone. Everybody has something. Even if you see someone who looks like they have the perfect Hallmark family, there's something in there. And I'm not saying that to be mean, but it's just true because we're fallen human beings.
That's right.
And what's also, I think, adds, you know, even more salt into the wound is when you're at home. And of course, at Christmas time, they always have all these, and I love the Hallmark Channel. They have wonderful movies, but sometimes it can be a painful reminder that you don't have the Norman Rockwell family.
That's right.
Everybody's sitting around the table waiting for the turkey to be sliced, and everybody's all happy and smiles. It's painful. It's hard.
And especially, I think, happens among siblings in particular, you know, that you can have, you know, in a family, 3, 4 siblings, and there's always usually one that's not getting along with others, like this dynamic that happens in this shift. And of course, the mother of the family is supposed to be the one to kind of keep the peace there, and sometimes the mother adds to the problem, sometimes she doesn't. But there's all that friction that occurs, and I know I've had things in my family, Teresa has, and I think that's one of the things to say to our viewers is just because we're here on EWTN does not mean that we are free from these problems. We all have it. And in particular, what I find even the most painful, that it gets, even besides the holidays, it gets magnified during weddings and funerals. Don't you find that? I mean, I had 3 daughters, all got married, and okay, we got through it all. But there's always this discussion about who should be invited. And oh, well, if you invite this person, then you can't, and then the seating arrangements. Oh, well, you can't sit cousin so-and-so near this one because they have a problem. And like you said, Teresa,
I'm laughing because it's so true.
From decades ago, and they're harboring this still. And I think some of us have to say, you know, why are certain people harboring these things? And sometimes it's things that the other person wasn't even aware of, and then they're holding a grudge, and the other person doesn't know why that even developed. They have no idea that you're mad about something.
And you've forgiven them, you've moved past it, but they haven't. And so even if you're forgiven them and you're in their presence, that tension is still going to exist because they haven't let go on their side. And there's nothing you can do about that. The one thing that I learned, and my husband taught me a lot about this in the teaching that he does as a deacon on forgiveness and reconciliation, you may not necessarily have both.
Right.
The forgiveness comes first. And as long as you're forgiving that person who's caused you harm, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be reconciliation. Maybe there can't, God willing, hopefully, but not every case in a family situation, in a family feud, whatever it may be, should or could resolve in reconciliation. You can't force a person to get back into a relationship with you, even if you want them to you know,
but
reunite.
forgiveness is the first step, and that begins to lift that burden from you. And I've done a lot of work with Dr. Philip Ney. He's a Canadian psychiatrist. He runs a family practice. He did for 4 or 5 decades up in Canada. He did a lot of work with people who are victims of sexual abuse and, of course, abortion and neglect as a child. And I'm a counselor in that program, certified. And one of the things they recommend for people to do is, it's an exercise in writing a letter, where you're going to sit down and say to the person who hurt you, because sometimes they're not aware of the hurts, and it's a very beautiful letter that you write, and you say, you hurt me when? And you list each thing that they hurt. But then you have to say at the bottom part of that letter, after you've listed your hurts, say, I'd like to talk to you about this so we can begin a reconciliation. I forgive you for these. And I am willing now for you to also share with me how I might have hurt you. So you see the point in this is that it's a two-way street here to build that path to reconciliation. Real reconciliation is not a magic wand. It could just happen. And I've actually tried this process, you know, with people, members of the family. And
did it work?
Well, in my case, it was sad that the other person didn't want to.
No, because I had the same thing. Well, you and I talked about this.
Yes, we talked about this. And they didn't want to take that next step to reconciliation. So I went back to Dr. Ney and said, okay, failed on the first step.
Now what?
But you know what happened? And I didn't realize this. But after I wrote that letter and I mailed it, I felt a weight off my soul that I had forgiven them and now it was out. And hopefully they would receive this and want to let me hear from them. Of course, they chose not to, but I still felt so unburdened.
It's not on you, it's on them. It's still on them.
Yes,
right.
And as you know, the priest also told me in spiritual direction, along with Dr. Ney, is that it's a process, Janet. And you entered into it in good faith, and now just continue to pray for the person. You have forgiven them, and the day may come that they want to reach back, they know you're ready with open arms to begin that discussion.
The other thing you have to do is you have to kind of like put a wall, protect your heart. Not harden your heart, but protect yourself from being hurt. Because in my situation, the same thing happened. I wrote a similar letter, and then I said, on the advice of my spiritual director, I sent Christmas cards, Thanksgiving, holiday cards, Easter cards, and I got them all back, unopened, returned to sender. And so I told my spiritual director, and it hurts, but at the same time, I wasn't expecting reconciliation, but I felt I needed to do it so I could be right with God and forgive. And I did, and my spiritual director, who was my pastor at the time, said, you know what, you were the one who tried. He said, always leave your door open, but there's nothing else you can do. You can't force that person to come back into your life, and you don't have to constantly open yourself up to rejection.
Right.
You know, because I've made it known through relatives of this particular person, nieces and nephews, with whom I'm still very close, even though not with their particular parent, that the door is always open.
That's right.
So that is, I think, and that's important for people to understand, that it's not you. If you have truly forgiven
From the heart.
from the heart,
Right.
and even gone to confession about maybe not forgiving, which was my case for a while because I was very angry. But once you let that go and you say, you know what, Lord, I'm going to pray for that person, and my door is always open. That's all you have to do. Continue to pray for them.
Sure.
But you can't be knocking on the door and say, come back into a relationship with me, because everybody has free will.
And if they're not
Right.
willing.
And this first step of forgiveness has to be one of the hardest steps, but it is not, you're not doing it for the other person. Because sometimes we think, and I know I've thought this many times, is why should I be the one forgiven if I feel like I'm the one offended? Shouldn't it be the other person asking for forgiveness? And it's the least that they can do. And on top of everything, I'm a victim, and now I'm victimizing myself by forgiving. When in reality, forgiving, as you very well illustrated there, is that lifting step. It's a healing for us, because the other person might not even be aware that they offended us, or maybe they are. But in any case, we are the ones who are replaying this video in our heads over and over again, building it up.
The tape recorder, as Father Frank
years.
says.
The
Father Frank
tape
Pavone.
recorder, and this is pulling toxins into our body, I mean, physically, spiritually, and physically as well. So we're intoxicating ourselves constantly, and when we do let go and forgive, then those toxins are no longer there, and they help us to see clearly and grow in spirituality as well.
And we misassociate the idea of forgiveness with justice. John Paul II said, forgiveness is not the opposite of justice. If you remember, years ago, of course, when he was shot by Ali Aja in St. Peter's Square, after he got out of the hospital, he went to see him and he forgave him. But they didn't go walking out arm in arm from the prison that day.
No.
Pope John Paul II and Ali Aja, he remained in jail for another 20, 24 years, and then was transferred to Turkey and also spent time there. So that doesn't mean that justice cannot be pursued. If you were offended in terms of, God forbid, sexual abuse, you have to forgive the offense, but also this has to be addressed.
That's right.
You know?
And forgiveness doesn't mean that the wound doesn't exist in your heart. The
Well,
wound
it
will
was like
continue.
I said with Dr. Nay's process, is that you write the letter of the hurts, you ask for them to give you some sort of kind of to pay back in a way for those hurts in some way. You know, so there is that need of justice. So that's part of the process, is to require that justice. And, you know, and the other thing when you say about the tape recorder, that's important for us not to play the tape recorder, but sometimes too we have to stop others in our family from wanting to play too.
Yes, and go over and over again the stories and the
Right,
details.
because they'll want to, and especially I find the danger zone is at family gatherings when they're all sitting around chit-chat, and they'll want to replay these hurtful stories. Oh, remember when so-and-so did such and such to you? And it's what I do now is I said, no, I don't want to discuss that. Let's not talk about that. And I switch the conversation immediately. You know, so we have to also be guardians of ourselves, to protect ourselves a little bit, to say, let's not go down that road. I don't want to discuss that. I've forgiven them. We're not going to repeat this story.
And oftentimes it could be someone else in the family has not forgiven that same person, and they want that's their time to get their pound of flesh, and they feel like misery loves company.
They
so
want
let's
you on
all,
their team.
Let's all jump in together, jump in the in
join
the
our
cesspool and discuss all this
And
stuff.
you have to stop that lovingly but firmly. And Mother Angelica used to say, God doesn't want you to be a doormat.
Right.
Right.
Don't put yourself in that situation.
Right.
Don't open it up. You have to have a lot of control, because the emotions will want to take over. And very naturally, we are emotions, but we're also reason.
Right.
Sometimes it also helps if you just say, you know what, I'm going to go and step into the kitchen. I think I can help somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, chop
I think
up
I'll
or
clear the
prepare
dishes now. I'm
Yes.
famous. I say, I think it's time to clear the dishes. In the kitchen I go.
Yeah, but not putting yourself in those situations.
That's right.
Is
Walk
really
away
important.
from them. You don't have
Yeah.
to stay there and face it. Walk away. Be the one who is in control and checking the emotions.
Yeah, I talked about that a lot with my spiritual director. And particular situation has to do with a sibling, and my mom always wants all of us together at the holidays, and this one particular sibling wants nothing to do with me at all. I still don't know why. And I decided, okay, for my mom, I'll go and I'll sit there. But it was very painful for everybody because of what this particular person did and the way this person reacted. And I said, I'm never doing that again. And I told my mother, and she even agreed. She said, you're right, it was ridiculous. You know, none of us should have to, put up with that. And I tried to do it for my mom, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not going there. Because what it was a very toxic, nobody enjoyed it. It was a very toxic afternoon
wasn't
because it
any
was all about this
productivity coming out
particular
of this.
person. And that everybody was so tense the whole time, waiting for
Nobody
this person
enjoyed the
to
holiday.
explode. Nobody enjoyed it. You know?
Yeah, I've seen this also in my family, that one person likes to attract the attention around him or herself in such a way, and they kind of, I've made up this term, don't quote me on this, but they triangulate, if you will. So they do something to somebody to get back at somebody else, at a third person. You have the triangle. So they'll try to hurt somebody so that other person will go to the third person and say, you can't believe what just happened with such and such. And this person who is trying to draw the attention around himself or herself, who originated all this, gets a double shot, so to speak. And this becomes a very a spiral of abuse, if you will, emotional or even physical sometimes. And we have to break it. If somebody offends us, we have to break it where it's like, well, the buck stops here. I'm not going to involve another person in my defense at this point, so that more people get harmed emotionally in this spiral of violence.
It's very hard, though, because oftentimes there's enabling going on with situations like that, and breaking the pattern of enabling is very, very difficult. It requires it to be very strong, and you could see it with, and I've done so many interviews on this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to recommend Dr. Ray Grendy's book, which is fantastic, as one of our resources today. But he and I have talked about this on my show in terms of one person may recognize, let's say if somebody is addicted to porn or addicted to whatever, drug addiction, whatever, and the one person, maybe a spouse or a child or a brother or sister, knows that person needs help because it's poisoning everybody else. Everybody else is, tiptoeing. The whole life revolves around this person who wants to be the center of attention. And you try to break that cycle. It's very, very difficult, very difficult, and sometimes often impossible if you don't have like an intervention in that support system. So, I mean, there's levels of family, difficulties. There could be just maybe a distant sibling or a distant parent. But then also, I'm sure there's many people out there who are suffering with serious, serious situations in their family.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very
but you're
serious.
not alone. We've all been through it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have some resources for you, talk about some more scenarios and what we need to do from a Catholic perspective, a feminine perspective, and a Catholic perspective regarding handling family situations. We'll be right back. Thanks for watching The Catholic View for Women. When we come back, we'll also give you details on our website and all great resources that we have for you. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us on this edition of The Catholic View for Women. Teresa Tomeo, Elena Rodriguez, and of course Janet Morana, talking about family feuds, and the feminine perspective, also the faith perspective, because again, it's all about God, and in terms of how we're dealing with situations, we should always look at everything through the lenses of Scripture and the teachings of the Catholic Church. Boy, there's a lot to cover in this section.
And, I'd like to go back and start with another scripture verse, because I think, we're talking about, these are things that are probably eliciting a lot of emotion in some of our viewers, because they've all, like us, have had these problems and issues in our family. So I'd like to turn to Ephesians and go with the following verse. It says, therefore, putting away falsehood, speak the truth, each one to his neighbor. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun set on your anger, and do not have room for the devil. The thief must no longer steal, but rather labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with one in need. No foul language should come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for needed edification, that it may impart grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with which you were sealed for the day of redemption. All bitterness, fury, anger, shouting, and reviling must be removed from you, along with all malice. And be kind to one another, compassionate, forgiving one another as God has forgiven you in Christ.
Wow.
And that says a lot right there. First of all, about the language. You have to watch, no matter how terrible the language coming at you, you've got to take the high road, and you've got to.
That's tough sometimes.
And that's tough sometimes when you're being attacked and assaulted, And
don't go down to their level.
Don't go down to their level.
Yeah.
And of course, when it says, "Do not let the sun set on your anger," is also very important. Now, even if they don't want to forgive or they don't want to talk, but what about you? You can control your side of this. Sure. And so therefore, pray. You know, you should always be saying in your prayers, and then pray for that person before going to bed at night.
My father used to always say that about the fighting, especially for married couples, never go to bed angry. And the Pope Francis says that a lot too when he speaks to families. Do not let the sun set on your anger. It's very important, because what happens is you go to sleep
and it festers,
and it festers, and you wake up and you start it all over again.
And there goes the tape recorder.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So
my dad raised both my brother and I, and he. As a boy and a girl, we always had different interests and all that. So there was always that difference between the two of us, plus separated with 4.5 years, which at that young age is like an eternity. Right. To be able to understand each other coming from different perspectives. So my dad always said, if two don't want to, if one doesn't want to, two will not fight. And I find that very, very wise, because sure, I mean, one might come in with a fight, but that doesn't mean that you have to answer to that fight. And it takes a lot of control. Right. It takes a lot of control. I grew up hearing that. I thought that was very wise. But how then when somebody presents a fighting position to you, how then do you handle that if your first inclination is well, let me tell you what I think.
And another thing.
Right. Yeah.
How do you handle that situation when you know somebody's coming with? Sometimes we know months ahead, I'm going to meet this person at this family gathering, and the first thing they're going to bring up is such and such.
Well, I think it depends on the situation.
Right.
I think you have to, and we've been through so many experiences together, we could write a book. We've actually talked about writing a book, but I don't know if that'll happen. But I think you have to evaluate the situation.
Right.
And if this is, let's say, a serious offense, something serious, God forbid, then you may not even want to go into that situation. You may have to protect yourself and say, you know what, I'm not healthy in that situation, and it's too sensitive. But this is where good counseling, good Catholic counseling comes in, a good spiritual advisor. Also, then, if you know you're going to speak to someone, or if they start something, then as Janet said, you know what, when you're ready to talk, when you calm down, let's come back and have a conversation. And if it means sometimes if you have to end it, hang up nicely. I'm going to hang up the phone now, not like boom, slam it, but say, you know what, I'm going to go right now.
Right.
You're not in the mood to talk. This is not going to go anywhere, but it's going to get ugly.
When you're ready,
when you're ready,
here to listen.
Call me.
Call me. Yeah,
exactly. Or I'll call you back. Let me know when you cool off, and I'll call you back.
And to go back to the family gatherings, sometimes if we know, cousin so and so or such and such is coming, and we know there's going to be a conflict. Well, when everyone's there, maybe you set the tone on positive things. Like, let's talk about positive things. Look at Aunt Sue. That's a beautiful dress you have on, Aunt Sue. And
kill them with kindness.
Yes, kill them with kindness. Like, start a positive vibe going among the family as the people are gathering, and just think of positive, affirming things to say to the different people as they're coming into your home, so that maybe if even that person is coming, it might have friction with another person, but if you've set this pleasant tone, that might help to calm the friction down.
Or mention a recent family success, like my nephew has just graduated. I'm so proud of him. He worked so hard.
That's right.
And then everybody's
Or you make
like,
the best darned cannolis, Aunt May. Thank you so much for coming. Right?
I can't wait until we try this dessert.
Cannoli cookies.
You make the best pinoli cookies.
And I do try to bring out those pinoli cookies, and that does quiet the troops down a little bit. The pinoli cookies, it does help.
Well, this is a really, I think, good discussion to have, because I know a lot of people are out there nodding their heads right now, because when I share certain things on the air, Dr. Ray Grundy and I we talk about it a lot when you're on my program. People can relate to that. So don't feel alone. You're not alone.
Right.
And as always, we have great resources here for you on The Catholic View.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about our homework.
Sure.
And I just want to remind everyone before I get into the depth of the homework is that the first step is if you're having this strife, spiritual director, you need to get one.
Catholic counselors.
And a Catholic counselor.
CatholicTherapist.com is a great website. We'll put that up on our page.
On our website. Okay. And then in addition, as I said, Dr. Ray Grundy, I have one of the books right here. It's called When Faith Causes Family Friction by Dr. Ray, available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. And also he wrote another book that the catalog has called Fighting Mad by Dr. Ray Grundy. Excellent resources. And of course, visit our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com. Sign up for our e-letter. Let us know how you're doing. Any questions or concerns, we'll point you in the right direction. And of course, like us on Facebook. And like I said, the holy reminders, like Mother Angelica said, always, always help.
Yep.
So at your next family gathering, our kitchen Madonna, if she's placed there on the table, that might calm the troops down a little bit too. And the symbolism is just beautiful. We have the kettle here.
How peaceful her face is. Isn't that beautiful?
Right.
Her face
how
is so
could
peaceful.
How could you fight?
How could you be mad when Our Lady's right there on the kitchen table?
Look at Our Lady. You can't fight. So the kettle reminds us that we have to nourish ourselves both in body and soul. The broom, of course, keeping our conversation conversation clean and our thoughts clean. And of course, use the broom to keep your house clean. And then finally, the keys, which will keep the house safe, locked up, but also that Mary will show us how to get into heaven with the keys to the kingdom.
So great advice, and thanks for listening. I know that many of you probably share in what we've been talking about. Just want to emphasize that you are not alone. Not everybody and very few people have the Norman Rockwell setting or the Hallmark movie setting, okay? Everybody's got something, as a friend of ours once said, but it's okay, because this is not our home. We're pilgrims, and just know that you're not alone, and we here at EWTN always try to give you the best resources. Dr. Ray Grundy has some great books. Seek out spiritual direction. Talk to your priest or pastor. The biggest thing you have to do is to forgive and love. But the rest is up to God. You can't force people back into a relationship. So remember that and take comfort in the fact that at least you're trying. Thanks so much for watching us at the Catholic View for Women. On behalf of our pastoral advisor, Father Frank Pavone, and my co-host, Elena Rodriguez, and Janet Morana, it's good to be with you here on the Catholic View. And we'll see you next time.